The Square Ball Podcast.
Welcome to the show. Brought to you from on top of a roof today, isn't it, Michael?
Apparently so, yeah.
Yeah.
With the new roofers, the new people who are working there, yeah?
Yeah, where?
West Yorkshire Electrical.
Yes. Every time, Phil. Every time.
Do you mend your own roofs, Michael?
I've done bits and bobs, yeah.
I thought you might.
I mean, it does leak a bit still, but, you know.
Any safety harnesses, equipment, or do you just get up there in the rain?
Well,
Were you up there on Sunday night?
The way I saw it, it was... There's like a single-story extension. I was working above that, so I'd only fall like one floor.
Okay.
So I thought that was probably fine.
That is not the way to do it, boys and girls. The way to do
Your
it...
wife's going, higher, higher. Go up on the main bit.
And the reason we're mentioning it, West Yorkshire Electrical, renewables, the specialists in renewables, which means they do solar panels, but because there's so much roof work involved, they have their own roofers now within the team. So they'll do the job properly. And they do roofing work as a result of that.
Let's get it all done at once.
Yeah. Don't get up there and do it yourself like Michael.
No.
Oh.
No.
Because it's the old do it yourself, buy twice problem.
That's not what they say, but
Is
yeah.
it not? No. No. Get the professionals in to do it. So we have West Yorkshire Electrical, fully accredited electrician who sponsor this show as well. wyelectrical.co.uk for details. But yeah, they've just they've taken on a roofing team within the West Yorkshire Electrical team to take care of all the roofy stuff. So it's West Yorkshire Electrical and roofy stuff.
And roof stuff.
Yeah.
It's a good name change.
Yeah. I don't think they've gone for the full name change.
Go to WY Electrical and roof stuff.
No, don't do that. Phil, save us. Let's make this show more professional, please, and tell me how things sit for you. The view from the press box is what this is all about. We get the fans' view on the match ball and all the other nonsense that we put out. What's it like up there in the press box at the minute?
How are the adductors getting on up there?
Yeah, I was going to say off the back of the Norwich game and a really good midweek win. We've got injuries to contend with now as we head into an FA Cup game. We'll look at the Plymouth game as we get into the second half of the show, I think. But where are we from your perspective?
There's not a lot of risk of adductors going in the press box. There's a lot of sitting around going on and coffee drinking. It's become the fashionable thing. Somebody actually tweeted me last night and said, I thought it was abductor. You know what we were talking about the other day.
Yeah.
And it tries to autocorrect on your phone when you're tweeting as well.
Yep.
To make you look like a fairly serious criminal, as opposed to a medical specialist. But somebody else is making the point that you always used to just talk about groin strains, but now it's all got very, very technical. And I suspect that's down to the fact that clubs used to, not take a kind of light touch approach to injuries, but it's all much more serious now, isn't it?
For example, like Eddie Nketiah's famous, he had, what was his injury? It was
an abdominal injury.
An abdominal injury.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very much the lower abdomen, hanging
the
abdomen.
bits that hang below.
Well, if I was dishing out injury news as a coach, I would certainly pick the moments to be broad and general or to be specific.
Yeah.
And adductor seems pretty specific to me. It seems to be quite in fashion, in the way that plantar fascia.
Is it a groin strain then? Is that what it is?
Pretty much. It's like the muscle down from your groin and your hip, isn't it? So something in that region, yeah. It's a muscular strain, put it that way. So
in the old days, when you were just applying a wet sponge, you could just be more broad and say it's groin, whereas when you're doing medical stuff, you go, all right, that's an actual
it used to
bit.
be. It used to be called sponge or Ralgex on the groin. Now you go off for a scan.
Have you ever got like Ralgex or deep heat on your balls or anything?
No, I don't think on my balls, but I've had it in various other places. Yeah.
If you've had it on your hands and you then go for a wee, that is an absolute.
Do people still use Ralgex? It's very sort of.
It feels like very
80s,
80s,
90s product, that, wasn't it?
It's
but
like,
you couldn't.
is Ralgex is the same as like a deep heat sort of wintergreen type spray, wasn't
it?
Yeah,
you couldn't play any sort of amateur sport, could you, without the dressing room smelling of that?
Yeah, smelled of it. Yeah,
and then you go home smelling of that, and people would moan that it was.
Spray it on your legs, and like because it's a cold February Sunday morning or whatever.
So it's infecting the lasagna at lunchtime.
Can't
see we often had lasagna and pennycake
Sunday
lunchtime. But
anyway. The advice is always. I mean, like it's good advice for life, but if you've been handling like deep heat and stuff, always. Wash your hands.
Yeah.
Good slide advice.
Seems reasonable.
That's the end of the show. Wash your hands, kids.
Fantastic. Yeah.
But,
public service. So Pascal Struijk has one of these. Has one of these muscles, but also one of these muscles injured. So
just the one has he got? Has he gone for more than one adductor? We were discussing whether there were more than one in the human body.
I think you have two, do you? Yeah. I think he has only injured one.
Right.
I haven't asked him personally, but he has one.
Get your hands in there. Get your hands in there, Phil, and check
with Ralgex. Yeah. Dan James also has one. Dan James going to miss the weekend's game. I think Dan James might have missed the weekend's game anyway because this feels like one of those FA Cup ties where you would definitely make changes. We also have Archie Gray, who's going to be out for certainly this weekend. I would imagine they're just doing tests on his knee. I think Farke was saying afterwards, Gray was quite concerned when he first overstretched that he might have done ligaments, might have been an ACL problem, but they had a good look at him last night, straight after the game. Didn't think that was a problem, didn't think that was what it was going to be, but still need to work out what his timescale recovery period is going to be. There was no Willie Gnonto either last night. Hip flexor has been bothering him, although Farke thought he would be back for the Plymouth Cup tie. So it's a sort of medium length injury list. It's not too severe, and I think that was part of the reason why Leeds were quite happy to ram that game into the schedule last night. Good form, not a particularly long injury list. It's obviously worse as a result of the game, but prior to it, they had most people available. And given the result, calculated gamble that's paid off.
Good question there about that, actually. Do you think there was sort of talking about a calculated move, a calculated power move of sorts, getting that game played? And obviously you need to win it and get the points on the board, but suddenly it means that if Leeds do progress through to the next round of the FA Cup, that we're not going to face rearranged fixtures further down the line when the pressure is even greater as we're getting towards the back end of the season. Does it make sense just from a housekeeping point of view to get a game like that done and out of the way?
Well, do you remember the Jesse Marsh podcast that we were chatting about, where he was talking about the game in hand that Leeds had when he got sacked, which had they won it, and it was Manchester United away, which they actually almost made a good fist of winning under Skubala, that they would have been 13th. And actually, if you look at the table, that's absolutely right. They would have been, you add those 3 points up, it would have taken them up to 13th place. It wouldn't have put them miles clear of the bottom three, it has to be said, but there would have been a hell of a lot of teams below them in the table.
Do you know what, Phil? If my lottery numbers had come up at the weekend, I'd be a multimillionaire by now. So what I'm going to say is...
You were going to say you wouldn't be here, but you would be here because otherwise you'd be at home. Yeah.
Effectively, I am a multimillionaire because I'm, had I chosen right with my numbers, that money would be in the bank. So
well, that's good to know. Well, next time Michael's roof's leaking, he doesn't need to go up there and risk immediate death. But the thing about games in hand is that the true value of them is always really difficult to work out, isn't it? Because if you're a team that's in the habit of losing, games in hand don't tend to be worth that much to you. And they're a bit of a comfort blanket until the point comes where you actually have to play them, and then you lose and you get nothing from them and they make no difference.
Which, in my opinion, is what made that so disingenuous as well.
Would be my point about it. And Simon Jordan, who is not, does not suffer fools gladly, basically said afterwards, that is just data talk. But in reality, you were a team who are losing a lot of games. Leeds this season are a team who win a lot of games. So when you're in form in particular, and Leeds do have form with them at the moment, it seems like an advantage to play the matches when you can. And also, the stockpiling them becomes a bit of a hindrance. Because like you say, if they do go through the fourth round of the FA Cup, then, they're into the fifth round. There's the risk of a replay against Plymouth. Things can start to get built up. The fixture list can start to build up quite quickly. I would love to know, and he would never talk about this, he would never admit to it, but I'd love to know as well how much in Farke's head he was thinking about the possibility that win last night, which Leeds did, win at Bristol City in the next league game, and they go into second place. Okay, probably only for 15, 16 hours, whatever it is, until Ipswich and Southampton played later. But it would be the first time this season that Leeds have actually been second. And I think psychologically and also aesthetically, when you look at the table, it makes a difference. When it comes to talking about can Leeds get there, can Leeds hunt down the teams in front of them, it makes a difference when you see that they actually are there, as opposed to thinking to yourself, well, if the next 4 or 5 results go exactly as they need to do, then it might happen. It's all bets off at the minute.
It undoubtedly cranks up the pressure, doesn't it, on Ipswich and Southampton, who know they can't slip up. And to be fair to them, by and large, they haven't. I know Ipswich have had a wobble lately, but Southampton have been almost faultless because they're on a generational run of form, aren't they? Best ever in the club's history or something like that. But it's just a reminder that it has to be sustained over and over and over again, which is why I think people say it's sometimes easier to be chasing down than in the position itself.
But why was the atmosphere as it was on Sunday before the Pirro penalty, going into injury time? Because people realised the same about Leeds, that it had to be win after win after win. There wasn't any breathing space that allowed you really to drop 2 points to Preston. So that became a really big result and a very big decision, right decision, but huge goal to settle that. And that's how it is. But it does, I think, transfer the pressure slightly when teams who've had breathing space, and you have to say with Southampton, they haven't to this point. They have been on the chase as well. But Ipswich in particular, there have been periods where they've had a pretty sizable chunky cushion there, which at an early stage of the season, you can never count on too much, but it does make it difficult for the teams behind you. Suddenly it looks completely different. It looks, at the moment, like too close to call. You know, if you were putting your money on who's going to finish second, you two, say you two. Daniel will say Leeds. Michael will probably say Ipswich. Southampton.
I've actually just got the odds in front of me, and Ipswich are now 4th favourites for promotion.
Oh, really?
And I can understand why.
There's basically nothing really to split us and Southampton. In decimal odds terms, they're 1.57, we're 1.62.
Right.
Which basically means if you put a quid on, you're getting £1.57 back for Southampton, £1.62 for us.
Yeah.
So there's nothing in it at all. And
so
Leicester,
fractionally,
and Leicester, as you would imagine, are there more or less.
There's part of you that's tempted to think that Ipswich are starting to feel the pace a little bit, that the pace is getting to them, and that's showing in their results. There's another part of you that has to be fair and say that they've actually had a really hard run of fixtures from the game at Elland Road and the derby against Norwich onwards, where they've had to play Leicester twice, and that Sunderland at home as well. I think this was probably always a period where they were going to drop points, whether they'd have accepted or settled for dropping as many points as they have. I doubt that. But they're probably the ones at the moment where people will be asking, is stamina starting to go a little bit? Hard to say for sure, I think. But this will put more pressure on them.
It's sort of had a bit of a tortoise and the hare feeling this season, hasn't it? Are we the tortoise in this? In that we are... this is the second week on the trot we've ended up talking about tortoises as well.
Yes.
Unprecedented stuff. Where we're kind of... It feels like after that initial one wobble in the in the first month of the season, that we've maybe just been keeping our head down, staying on our course, had a little wobble ourselves over Christmas, but by and large, just been chipping away at that points total. And that's one of the things I kind of look at, is that gap has been far bigger to both Leicester and Ipswich. And obviously you've got to factor Southampton into this now. Earlier in the season, it's just gradually coming down and coming down. So despite the ebbs and flows of the season, we're just chipping away at it. And that makes me think that what Farker says is right. It's when you get into the final 5-6 games of the season that it's really, and it's an obvious thing to say because, you get promoted at the end of the season, but that's the time to worry about exactly what the table looks like because of those ebbs and flows. But it's trending in the right direction.
But you only worry about those games if you put yourself in a position to be able to worry about them, which is why the season matters from start to finish. Our data guys put together a nice graphic for the piece we've run this morning, which is showing the shift in league position for Leeds right the way through the season. And as is no surprise to anybody, at the beginning it looks quite average, and it's dipping down into the bottom half of the table. But for the past 20 games, it's been top 6 with I think only one exception. And for a long, long time now, it was top 3. It was top 3, third place basically for a long stretch, and has been top 4 pretty much from kind of October time, middle of October onwards. It's been really, really consistent. And I don't know, I don't look at this Leeds team and think that they're perfect tactically. I don't think that there aren't things about them that could be honed differently. There are periods of the game, like the start of the second half last night, where you remind yourself that Leeds can be vulnerable. They're not totally bulletproof, and we've seen that in various games, particularly away from home. But they have been very good this season. They're really... I was writing a piece saying they're just competitively sound. They've actually got, at the moment... Can I go down the expected goals route? Because you'll get into the home and away table soon.
Well, if we start throwing rotten veg at you in a minute, Phil.
That's fine. If I start talking about expected goals, you have permission to get into the home and away table. That seems fair. But they have the best expected goals for calculation. They've got the best expected goals against calculation as well in the entire division. That includes Leicester. And okay, they've played that additional game last night, but it's not as if an additional game swings that massively. They've just been exceptionally good at both ends of the pitch, and whether the levels of flair are wild or whether the levels of flair are always there consistently for 90 minutes, which they're definitely not. There is this trend in this Leeds team that sometimes, and I think last night was an example, they're not that brutally ruthless when they take the lead, and it can put a game like last night's on edge. But they are looking really impressive and have performed impressively. And the overriding feeling at the end of last night was that even though there was that very, very dodgy period in the second half, Norwich didn't really look like scoring during the second half, with the exception of that chance that Archie Gray swept up pretty brilliantly towards the end.
That was fantastic. And I said it on the match ball, and we'll reiterate it again. That was a match-saving tackle, and it was fantastic.
Late in the game, at his age,
Was
17,
it 4-on-2 at that point as well? It was like four.
It was something like that. They had completely lost the left side of the pitch, and all it was needing from Norwich's point of view was a little step back inside and then bang into the bottom corner. And you'd think that a decent Championship forward would stick that chance away. And the thing that I really liked about Gray, not just the stamina to get back, it was the fact that he stood up and he took his time and he picked his moment rather than just diving in.
As the dads always say to the lads, keep your eye on the ball.
Keep your eye on the ball, and more often than not, stay on your feet as well. There was that. There was obviously the late scramble in the box when Rodon's header flew back towards the penalty spot, but that was all just kind of, desperate Hail Mary stuff. Leeds had all the chances, weirdly. But that period of the game where they lost control was odd, and better sides would have punished them for that.
Did we lose control, though, or did we lose control of possession? Because we did give it back to them a couple of times when there were sort of desperate clearances, but I remarked on the match ball and said, if you watched what we did, we kept falling back into shape really, really well and defended the sort of 10 or 20 yards just in front of our own box. And that's what I've noticed they tend to do, is like the midfielders will not jump in aggressively to tackle. And if you notice when they did get in behind us and catch us on the break, it's when we got sucked into their game. When
Kamara did that a couple of times.
Similar to what we do when we pop it into midfield and back against the defenders, and we went chasing it and the crowd was kind of up and urging them to get on it. And that's when we got pulled out of position and they counted on us a couple of times. But by and large, for most of that period, if we lost possession or they recycled it and came across to the other side, we'd fall back into our structure. And we looked pretty sound, I thought, in that structure, albeit it wasn't a great deal of fun at the time.
They controlled it. It was controlled in the sense that there were no chances for Norwich. So they weren't losing their heads or losing a grip of the game round about their own box. But Farke said afterwards that it wasn't the intention to be playing that or playing like that or doing that. Norwich just got on top of them, and McLean suddenly seemed to have a lot of space and time to use the ball. They weren't getting close enough to him. And I mean, he was a player that Farke would have taken in the summer if he could have got him. And you can see why. He's a really good footballer. A couple of occasions where Kamara, like you say, when they got sucked back into something closer to the press, as it usually is with Leeds, Kamara went for the ball alone, went too late. Norwich were able to get beyond him. But it still is a fact that there wasn't much in the way of goal threat from Norwich in that period. And actually, the good chances fell to Leeds. There's that one for Anthony that he just didn't get a hold of before McLean came sliding in. And there was that one for Bamford, which was just asking for him to hit it with his right foot, really, rather than his left.
If only he had one.
He is very, very left-footed, isn't he? But again, good header, that in the first half. It really was a good finish.
Yeah.
And they, like we keep saying, the goals come in streaks, and you would assume on the basis of, prior career, the goals might well dry up again at some point, because that's how it's always been. But this little run's been dead valuable. And also considering that at the point where he came into the team, they were under a little bit of pressure after the Preston and the West Brom games.
Yeah, I don't know which veteran manager it said. It might be one we don't like, so I don't want to quote them too closely. But is it something along the lines of centre forwards score your goals, but centre backs win your titles? And the defensive solidity that we're displaying is remarkable. And we've waxed lyrical about Joe Rodon on the weekly show this week. And we've conceded the second fewest goals in the division at 26, behind Leicester's 22, and we've scored the third highest by the looks of it by my calculation at 51. Southampton have got 53, Leicester have got 56. So we're about as near as damn it as you were saying about the
Can
XG.
you break it down by home and away for me, please?
I don't want to. Do you want me to?
Had enough of
No,
that.
God, no.
It's gone out of fashion.
Well, actually, 32 goals scored at home, only conceded 11 away. Let's have a look. We are still fourth best for the away as well, 19 and 15. So it's a bit closer away from home. We don't quite score as many, but yeah.
Rodon is critical to this, though. It's not him alone. That's not the only reason that they are strong defensively. And there's always a little bit like teams, top sides in the Premier League that have really good defensive records. There's always a factor in this of Leeds having a much better squad than various other squads in the Championship. But Rodon is crucial. And it strikes me that the one game where Farke had him available and chose not to use him was Southampton after his red card against Hull when he came back from suspension. And that really has been the one day where Leeds have looked pretty shambolic defensively. Rodon just does all the right things. Has enough pace, actually. There's one moment in particular in the first half last night where it just looked like somebody had the run on him. And he had enough pace and enough strength to get back, do what he does, clean up, sweep up. And
was that down
clear.
over by the West Stand on that side, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah. And you just thought for a moment that he'd he'd lost track of who he should be marking and that he was going to get done for pace. But it's kind of all there. And I think, you could apply this to Farke as well. There will be the question if Leeds go up of how is Farke going to do in the Premier League? How is he going to prove himself? Because you can't pretend that in the spells with Norwich he did. You can see from the results that it didn't work out. And Rodon doesn't have a track record at that level either. But I do feel more and more watching Rodon that he's starting to come into his own. And I think this season is doing his confidence and his ability a lot of good. Seems to be bringing it out of him. And you think that if there was a time for anybody to invest in him as a potential Premier League player, then after Tottenham trying previously, then this is it.
They must have identified something in him to have signed him in the first place.
They do this. They did it with Jed Spence. They did it with
Jack Clark,
didn't they? They do seem to occasionally just go, who's done well in the Championship, we'll have them. Do we need them? Does the manager want them? Never mind, get them anyway.
Do you know what's weird about Jack Clark, though? And I'm sure we said this around about the Sunderland game when he played well, was that when he was sold, Leeds were delighted with the fee, absolutely delighted with the fee. Not because they didn't rate him, but they just weren't sure that he was going to train on, and they didn't think he was at the point at that stage where he was necessarily really worth that. If you sold him now, you'd easily make a profit on that 9.4 million. No problem at all. And the same with Spence. I mean, there's obviously things about Spence that make him difficult. He's a really good footballer. So I don't think, even with Rodon, I don't think Spurs are dreadfully bad at identifying players who have talent. It's just what then happens with them. You don't see Rodon getting a look in there, and because Tottenham would have taken a permanent fee for him in the summer, you know that he's for sale and not in the picture. Clark has obviously gone up to Sunderland. Spence, you just don't see it working out for him at Spurs either. So it's the development pathway in a way that I suppose you could apply that to certain players at Leeds, couldn't you? Like Gelhardt and others. There was this plan, but has it worked? I
don't know if it's an age thing, but with Jed Spence, I kind of want to sit him down and say, God, please don't waste this. You don't realise how good an opportunity you've got. You've got everything in front of you now. Because I get the feeling that he'll get to 35 when it's, if his career's probably over by that point or whatever, and I don't know if he's sat on his cash or whether it's drifted away for him or whatever it might be, and just say, look, you had this opportunity to go really far, but anyway, not my problem, is it?
Not everybody's that bothered. Not everybody wants football to be everything for them. Pays a lot of money, but I've never had a problem with footballers who don't, like David Batty, who just don't like football or aren't really that into football, provided what you're getting from them in return for the money, i.e. the performances, are really, really good. And that was the thing about Batty. He can go away and say, I've absolutely no interest in football. And, fine. You don't have to be interested in it, do you? But
there's that sort of, that label gets applied to footballers about attitude problem. It could just be a lack of focus, couldn't it? Because who had total focus on their life at 23 years old? I don't know. Did you?
Yeah, I know. So maybe just happy with his lot, happy with how it's panned out to this point.
Yeah. Fair enough.
What can you say?
I mean, I'd quite happily accept Jed Spence's wages. I don't know about you.
What I think you can't expect as a player is that if you have issues like Spence's had that have caused Farke to send him back and Leeds to cut short that loan, you can't demand or expect that people tolerate that. People will take a view on it, so you have to accept that that's how it will be, and that is how it's worked out at Leeds. But for individual player, how they go about it is entirely up to them.
I think one thing you can say on Rodon, for a lone player in particular, he is completely involved in this, isn't he? Because occasionally lone players can look a little bit on the fringes, both in terms of selection, and then when you see them, you may be like, I'm not sure if they kind of know this is for the next 6 months only or whatever. But Rodon, it looks like he's Ben White,
except with a permanent deal at the end, isn't he?
I was going to say without the permanent tan. But yeah, he looks like he's come here to get us up and actually desperately wants to.
But it surely helps as well that he's got Ampadu there. He's got Dan James there. They will be pretty tight from the Welsh setup. And I think there has been, and I've thought this really from the end of the transfer window onwards, that there's been quite a bit of intelligence with the way this squad's been put together, the balance of it. They've got pretty much what they need in most positions, with a few exceptions, which you're going to highlight shortly. But I think it's easier for somebody like Rodon to come to Leeds with Ampadu, with a good squad, club that are going well, and settle and find his feet than it is to just pitch into somewhere random and suddenly try to look good.
With reference to the Welsh, sorry for this, but have we got any transfer leaks?
I thought that was going to be on the basis that Leeds are getting linked with purely Welsh players.
Well, my way into it was going to be, I was going to say, with reference to Jed Spence and the fact that we don't have any right backs because Ayling's gone, but that wasn't as good as making a really, really crap pun based on leaks.
Yeah, someone asked me the other day, are there enough Welsh players of Championship stroke Premier League standard for Leeds to fill a full team with them, which is a fair point. But there are some out there who Leeds have looked at. What's the date today? 25th?
It's the 25th today. This will come out on the 26th,
okay, so
yes.
You're always a risk at this point. The stuff gets superseded. You will have seen the links to Ben Godfrey this week. There is interest there. Seems to be interest from a lot of clubs in him as well. The thing that Farke was hinting at before the Norwich game, we saw him at the press conference, and he didn't say this in as many words, but he was kind of giving the impression that he was hoping Stroik would be back quite soon, but he wasn't totally certain. And it almost made you think that the injury that Stroik's got is potentially not a massive problem and could heal up, but could potentially drag on a little bit. And I think they are mindful of that, which is partly why they've been looking at centre-backs. We mentioned Ben Davies at Spurs, although I really didn't ever expect that one to get going. But obviously there's the Creswell situation on top of that, which you would think is going to have to get addressed properly in the next few days. Otherwise, they're going to get into a scenario where he can't move, he isn't playing, he isn't getting picked. I don't really see who that benefits at all, although it's clearly Farke's prerogative to make that decision.
It's ended up a bit of a mess, that one, hasn't it, unnecessarily?
It has, weirdly, yeah. It's not that it's been a surprise at all to see that Creswell wanted to go out and play, because he was at Millwall, there for a full season. He is very dead set on getting minutes, and I think, just to be fair to him, very dead set on just keeping developing by making sure that he is kicking a ball. But it has become problematic and awkward, that.
Because it's a balls out move going public on it, isn't it, Phil? Like, these things happen.
By who?
Well, the club. If the club goes public on a player not having their head in the game, it's a bit of it crosses a threshold, doesn't it? Because obviously there's internal strife all the time, because we're dealing with human beings. Players will moan about not being in a team, will want to be in it. They'll go see the manager. Why are you not picking me, boss? Whatever it might be. So for whatever Cresswell to have done or said that's caused Farke to go public on his dissatisfaction and lack of focus, it felt, I mean, I described it in one of the other shows this week, it's got the potential to come across as a bit burning of bridges, doesn't it?
But here's the problem. Once Cresswell hasn't shown up in the squad for several weeks, how do you deal with that question? In the same way as when Pablo Hernandez didn't show up at Palace.
But you can straight back, Phil. You can turn around and you can say, he's always in my plans. We've obviously got a limited number of places on the bench. I want to pick a more attacking bench. Hopefully he's still in my plans. He's in my thinking. Hopefully he can play his way back into form.
A slight groin strain off sickness is the other thing people say week on week.
Yeah, it's pulled as a doctor. Yeah, but you're a hostage to fortune there, aren't you? Because if you suddenly run short of centre-backs, or if you're away at Peterborough, where he isn't involved at all, there's no credibility in that, is there? And as a manager, you're perfectly entitled to stick to that line and to stick to your guns and, like you say, straight bat it. But people don't buy it. So when Leeds went down to Palace and Hernandez was left out after the Leicester game where he threw away his armband and kicked that ball, and Bielsa was saying to us he wasn't here because Jack Jenkins was the right player to pick, there was no way any of us were sitting saying, yeah, tactically, I totally get that, yeah, no, that makes absolute sense. And Bielsa would not go into that, and he wouldn't say any more. But it creates as much of a story, really, as just saying, I wasn't that happy with him, and we need to sort this out. And I think that became the issue with Creswell after Peterborough, was everybody was sitting thinking to themselves, well, if he's not involved at Peterborough, when you're making changes and you're playing Ampadu at centre back, then when is he going to play? And more to the point, why isn't he travelled? Why isn't he involved? And I think Farke realised himself that there comes a point where you have to be fairly straight about it. And I think perhaps as well, from Farke's perspective, he maybe just wanted to say to Creswell, listen, this isn't a great situation and I would prefer it to be sorted out. So I am just going to put cards on the table and I am going to say to people, this is how it is.
Essentially, it's a reminder of the power structure, though, isn't it, really? It's like...
I mean, I'll give you another example, right? We were on the Athletic podcast earlier, we were talking about Calvin Phillips going to West Ham, and Sam Lee, our Man City reporter, was asked about Guardiola doing something pretty rare, which is basically saying Phillips is overweight. That's why we're not using him. That is quite an incendiary thing to say about. Even if it's true, coaches and managers be really careful before they say that sort of thing. And Guardiola doesn't do that stuff without a bit of calculation. So he must have decided, I'm just going to say this because I'm not happy about it. And you remember when Phillips came back from the Euros, when he was at Leeds, he wasn't perfectly in shape. He was Oh, he wasn't overweight, but he was beyond the weight targets that Leeds had, which were really, really strict. There's no pretending otherwise.
And it was daily weigh-ins as well, wasn't it?
It was tough, yeah. So he came out of the team. And again, you were looking at the team and saying, but Phillips surely has to play in that. If you've got Phillips, why is he not involved?
And it's a reminder, I guess, then that the team and the club overall is the thing that is of paramount importance.
It definitely is.
If you step outside the boundaries of the rules that we set, then you will pay the price by being removed from that.
But it's also a reminder that if at some point you don't address these things when they become almost impossible to ignore, it does create frustration, and people do get, because Farker has said, I'm not happy with his focus, and Creswell might have a totally different view on this. If Creswell was to speak about it, he might dispute some of this, he might agree with it, he would give his take on it. But if Farker says, I'm not happy with his focus, therefore he's not involved, the support can't really argue with that, can they? Because you either back a manager's right to take a view on that sort of stuff, or you're saying that players run the show and players make the decisions, or some players are too good or too valuable or too big or whatever else.
Hence the reason why they couldn't sell Willie Nonto in the summer, because he's demanded to be sold. If he gets sold, then it sends a message to everybody else, doesn't it? Yeah.
But what had to happen with that was that it had to get resolved. Otherwise, you were going to have this player who wants to be at the Euros with Italy and is actually a very good footballer doing nothing because he's ostracised from the squad, or you get him back in the mix because he isn't, he isn't going to get a move elsewhere. And it looks now like there's a very strong chance that he's going to extend his deal at Leeds, which Leeds would really like him to do. I think I said on the last podcast, I don't necessarily see a better move out there for him than getting promoted with Leeds back into the Premier League. It seems like the kind of best of both worlds. But yeah, these situations are tricky, and I think I did understand why in the end Farker had his say on it, because it was there was no way he could carry on just sitting there saying, yeah, he's really important, this, that and the other. It's just a case of who I need in the squad at any one time, particularly when you had a game like Peterborough where, all things being equal, he would surely have had some minutes.
Does Creswell get a second chance then? Because he gave Nonto one, and there's a cup game coming up, and we've got a shortage of centre-backs, and both Rodon and Ampadu could probably do the rest.
Well, we will absolutely ask about this tomorrow.
Ampadu's not getting a rest, is he?
No.
But the year's like 2074 and Ampadu's still travelling to Plymouth. We'll ask about this tomorrow. I think in terms of the cup game, definitely, but also with the deadline coming round, how is this gonna fall? How is this gonna unravel itself? And I suppose when it comes to Farker, what does he see happening if Creswell is still here beyond the deadline? You would think that Creswell would have it in his head if he isn't going, that he needs to find a way back into this. Otherwise, what's the point? What good are the next 3 or 4 months? But in terms of a second chance, yeah, I think I don't think that would be in question. But there's going to have to be some diplomacy with that, I think.
Have you ever shown up for work overweight or unfocused?
Not once. Every time.
What do you mean ever? Yeah.
Anything in these links to the Liverpool lads? If we go across Stanley Park from Ben Godfrey at Everton to some of the younger lads they're getting linked with us, aren't they?
Godfrey, yes. You'll have seen Calvin Ramsey linked at Liverpool. He's been on Leeds' radar for a long time, and actually going back to previous regime, he was one of the players that Orta scouted when he was up at Aberdeen. And Leeds were pretty close to getting him, actually. It would have been an academy signing, I think, more than anything, 21 signing initially. But it was certainly on that kind of borderline of pushing through. And
we've got, who is it as well? Sorry to interject. I was going to say, is it Jordan Miles is his name, who's coming in from Aberdeen?
From Aberdeen, yeah, was at West Ham. He'll join the recruitment team, I think, under Greta Steinson once the window closes, so early February or March. It'll be pretty quick. He should be in for the summer window.
But that just made me think of the link to Aberdeen and possibly the fact that we've been
there certainly is that, but I mean, Leeds know about Ramsey inside out. He was at Preston, didn't get much in the way of games at Preston, so was recalled. And I mean, like with Carvalho going to Hull, I think with these players, Liverpool are very, very set on them going to places where they are going to be, going to be in the team. And I suppose, Gray getting injured, depending on how serious that is, that creates an issue at right back. But it is a definite problem in terms of recruitment, is that I think if you're on the outside looking in, you're not quite sure where in this team you're going to get into. Even for somebody like Pirro, actually, because I was writing the small little last night for today, saying a definite different structure to Leeds with Bamford up front. It's not massive. It's not a complete overhaul at all. It's predominantly as it was, but you just have like proper demarcation now between who's at 10, who's at 9. It doesn't feel like a shared role anymore. You can properly see who's leading the line, and I do think Bamford has made a difference at a time when they kind of needed somebody.
It feels a bit more basic, but in a good way.
Yeah.
And I mean that as an asset rather than a
I would agree. It looks more like a structure you recognise, if that makes sense. Structure you're not sort of trying to figure out, and there does seem to be a good amount of understanding of who's where and who's doing what. And Rutter, you have to say, seems really happy in that 10 role, doesn't he?
He's just happy, full stop.
Yeah.
That's a happy boy.
Yeah, which is nice, because I don't think the back end of last season or the second half of last season was at all fun for him. There wasn't an awful lot he could do about it. He wasn't getting played much. But, the story went that Allardyce came in and said he is very, very good, but I just can't use him because he has no confidence.
Yeah.
His confidence has just been blown by this period. He needs to start again and get going. And this has been a perfect season for him.
And it's all Victor Orta who deserves the credit, as Victor said this week, hasn't he? That people are complaining about why you rolling your eyes at me, Phil.
I just it just seems like starting up that argument again for no reason. And I mean, he's been round the houses with it so many times. I have, and so have other people. You win some, you lose some. There are some players that Orta signed who've been very good, no doubt about that. Somerville developing into one. I don't count Rutter, because Rutter was signed as a £30 million player in the Premier League. So the judgment on Rutter is going to depend on what happens if Leeds go up and how good he is. And if he's very good in the Premier League, then you'll say, yeah, good deal. But don't forget, that is a record signing at Leeds. But there are others who have been successful, have done well. There are plenty of signings that were not successful, have not done well. I always think...
Come on, let's dig out Victor Orta. Come on, let's rip off the Band-Aid. Come on.
I always think as a director of football, head of recruitment, whatever it is, that as soon as you start shouting about the odds about the ones that went well, people are just going to dig up the ones that didn't.
A vow of silence is the only way to go for him.
Yeah.
Just don't say anything ever again.
That would be, I think, a vow of silence for directors of football recruitment people generally is probably a pretty good move.
Greta Steinson looks like the sort of man who only speaks in one-word sentences anyway.
He's got a hell of a handshake, him,
Right. Have you met him?
Yeah. Don't get caught out by thinking you're just going to get a gentle,
Describe it. Did he crush your knuckles?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's proper Game of Thrones. Hello. You know?
A good firm fist.
But I think you would say that the recruitment's been good this season, no? And that doesn't have to involve Orta in that discussion. But
do you know what? It's been sensible.
Yeah.
Which is something I think we were crying out for more than anything at times there. And it's something Kinnear actually acknowledged when he came in here. And he was saying like maybe they missed out the obvious kind of 6 and 7 out of 10 players when they were going for these moonshot players.
Yeah, I think so. But bear in mind that if they do go up, they're going to... this applies to Farker and some...
Don't talk about the future. We can dig out Victor Orta and...
Yeah, absolutely. But once you get promoted, then
let's enjoy the ride.
To show that you can be sensible in the Premier League as opposed to being sensible in the Championship, where you have a much bigger budget than most clubs.
Let's cross that bridge when we come to it, Phil.
Absolutely.
Europe as well next year to contend with because of the
FA Cup one.
Yeah. Oh, well, need a bigger squad for that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Won't we? Yeah, we can see how disruptive that can be. Yeah. Speaking of the Cup game then, should we talk about Plymouth briefly and what
Are you hoping for a replay in this one, Phil?
Absolutely. I'd take it. I'd snap your hand off now if you offered me that. Yeah.
When would the replay be if there was one? You'd presume would it fall into the middle of the week leading into the Rotherham game?
Where are we?
So we are on it'll be Friday. So this weekend is Saturday the 27th.
I'm looking at Plymouth's fixture list.
Saturday the 27th. So it'd be the week. It's normally a week on Tuesday or Wednesday, isn't it? So the 6th or 7th it'd be, would it?
I had a look last night and it slipped my mind, and I was very much hoping that it wasn't going to fall into the week between. Where are we? Between Bristol City and Rotherham.
But
I suspect it would. I'm pretty sure that's what it was, which will mean Bristol City away, Plymouth away, Rotherham at home, Swansea away, Plymouth away.
Wow.
So
let's just win it. Let's just win.
How is your marriage, Phil?
About to get considerably worse, or potentially better, given that I'll never be there. You know when petrol stations used to give you vouchers back in the day? I wrote this earlier. When you bought petrol, you got like those Shell vouchers, Esso vouchers.
Yeah.
Well, this would get you a free duvet, wouldn't it?
Right.
This amount of driving, you would get a free duvet or like free.
It's like the air miles, but for the road.
Or something. Yeah. You know that 80s thing.
Yeah, that's just reminded me of, when you go to the petrol station and above the pumps they have those
The
things
quality
for sale.
products.
Stuff like a headlamp. Do you want a very bright headlamp? You got one of those? Have you ever bought anything from a petrol station?
Nah.
I must have bought some of that stuff sometimes, but I know what you mean.
I think my dad's a sucker for like JML style stuff, like the TV adverts that you see.
I think Mike will buy quite a lot of that. Stuff that you don't really need but could potentially be useful.
I'm not buying any garage though.
Nuclear war or something.
I'm like a DHgate AliExpress man, where you get the proper slave labour stuff shipped in for 80p.
So you like things like that, isn't it? Things made in sweatshops.
Perfect for me, yeah.
Exactly what you're after.
So this is the Grand Esso Tour, this one. Yeah, but it's strange because I think he will make changes for this game. I think he probably has to. And he wants some players to get minutes, but I think he'll be more and more mindful, particularly with this run coming up, of just looking after.
Quick curveball. Is Adam Forshaw cup-tied? Do we know? Will he be running their midfield?
I don't believe he played for Norwich because he was just about to head out. But do you know what? I haven't looked.
You said that like you were from Norwich as well, then, which was quite good.
Norwich.
Very
Norwich.
good. Very good.
Yeah.
He hardly played there and has gone on a free. So I suspect he'll be available.
Right.
But Darko JB is down there. Won't be
because he's on loan.
He's on loan.
Well, it'll be nice to see Forshaw again and be able to give him a round of applause. Hopefully, as we resoundingly beat them.
A good guy, Forshaw, and he's a good player. We just never got to see enough of it.
Yeah. What other changes have we got then for this? Pirro up front, you reckon, or does Bamford stay in because he's on this hot streak? You don't want to kind of take the wind out of his sails.
I think he rests Bamford this weekend. Yeah, I think so. Pirro would be an obvious one, definitely. I think you play Anthony. James will come out of the team.
Somerville out. He's tended to rest Somerville in the cup ties, hasn't he?
We'll see where Nonto is injury-wise tomorrow. But again, if he's fit, then kind of open goal, that one. The one you'd like to see get a bit of a push is Joseph, I think, up front. Let's see a little bit more of him.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Or does he maybe play him out wide if Somerville's not available? Because he has tended to come on and play sort of out wide.
He can be quite versatile, but they think a lot of him. A lot of people think a lot of him, actually. I think he's a good player. But obviously, yeah, there's scope to mix it up a little bit. I think he's going to have to push some of his midfielders, isn't he? Because he hasn't, with Gray missing, he hasn't got vast amount of choice there. But Cooper, you would think if he's 100% ready to go, he will play. There'll be a bit of a mix-up.
Adam Forshaw did play in the cup.
Oh, did he? Right, okay.
In the first, they drew 1-1 with Bristol, and he played in that first game, and then he didn't play in the replay.
Good knowledge. So there will be no
tied.
Forshaw, yeah.
Right, that's interesting because him and JB have been their midfield. So with both of them out, you'd be interested to see what they do in that regard.
When you said had been, like I think one game.
Once.
Well, I'm taking that as 100% evidence on the
absolutely,
100% recent evidence, Phil. I don't know about you. It'd be nice to see Leeds United head into the fifth round of the cup. Is that the second year on the bounce if we do it? Wow,
exciting! It still won't feel like a cup run though, will it? Until you have a big or sort of unexpected win or difficult win. Go somewhere, turn it on, and then you think, right, here we go.
I can't help but still view it as a bit of a distraction. That's not to say that I don't want to progress. I don't want to progress. I do want us to progress, is what I'm saying. But until you get that big tie that you win or something exciting happens, get it out of the way.
Yeah,
because I think the significance of the league games is growing now.
It starts to feel a little bit more like a nuisance when it falls into a week like this where you've already played twice, Sunday, Wednesday, and when on Wednesday you've lost a couple of players, James and Gray, to injury. They just need to be sensible. But I think Farker will be right. What he was saying this about the playoffs. If it is the playoffs at the end of the season, he doesn't particularly want to do that thing if Leeds are already in it, where kind of plays weakened teams towards the end of the season because you start to lose your rhythm and your mojo goes a little bit. And he'll probably be thinking that with the FA Cup. You don't want to get toughed out easily or in a way that does you no favours. But again, it's I really hope they go through because they never had a decent FA Cup run.
That's just provoked a really bad, stressful idea that we play Southampton on the final day and maybe we're in with an outside chance of getting something or whatever. There's a little bit of something at stake. Somerville loses his head, gets sent off for violent conduct, misses all 3 playoff games. That
Mr. Cross this bridge when we come to
it's spending too much time with Normanton.
I've not thought of that one. Thanks very much for that.
Because we've been really well disciplined this season, haven't we? With the exception of just like Meslier losing his head at Preston.
I think he's going to go full Max Gradle final day of the season.
Yeah, just completely loses his shit. Punches the ref or something.
If it
Well, let's
was,
hope.
If it's David Webb,
I was going to. If it's David Webb, fair enough.
Yeah,
he
you
probably wouldn't even send him off for it either, given his acceptance of violence that he showed the other week.
take one for the team and all that. Yeah, so fingers crossed then for a Leeds United victory.
Did you see the referee head the
weekend,
ball yesterday, by the way?
No, I didn't know.
There was one point when the ball was in
I know it
midfield.
bounced off him.
Oh, see, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, the referee headed it. I've never seen that before. And it looked deliberate as well. He braced himself for it and kind of nodded it back, it looked like to me.
Right.
Worth watching again.
Yeah. No, I thought you were meaning deliberate header. I didn't think that kind of fell into the category.
Runs off celebrating. Yeah, let's hope for a Leeds United win anyway, and we'll debrief it all after the weekend, shall we? And,
Absolutely.
And look forward to when's the next round? Or am I getting ahead of myself there? When's the draw?
I've not even looked.
Monday night or something.
Yeah. They spread the FA Cup games. They're probably one tonight, and they spread it out over like 5 days now.
What do you want if you go through? Do you want lower league to continue, or do you want a bit of a barnstorming trip to Anfield?
Home tie as easy as you could possibly wish, I think.
Yeah, that's my choice too. Get through, rest some players, give people like Joseph a bit of a run. Yeah,
keep the squad. Keep the squad utilised so it keeps them happy.
And a game that's not massively distracting as well, because we've seen in the past, occasionally if you get a big cup game looming, and then you know the week before you've just got to go to Swansea or whatever, people can be a bit like, Swansea's a bit boring.
Happened to Middlesbrough a little bit, didn't it, recently?
Yeah, I know what you mean. The problem is that as time goes on, anytime you get an away trip like City or Liverpool, it's just no chance, is it? You just know that the odds are so slim.
Stuart Dallas comeback game.
That's it. That's it. So yeah, I'm with you. Really, something low key at home would be perfect.
Well, to answer your question, by the way, it's Bournemouth Swansea on Thursday night, which will be last night as you hear this. But the Friday night game, let's have a look. I've just jumped onto the web page. If it actually updates, there we go. You got 4 to pick from on Friday night. Bristol City against Forest, Chelsea against Villa. You got Sheffield Wednesday against Coventry and Spurs against Man City. That'll be interesting, won't it?
Wednesday Coventry will be a thriller.
Oh yeah,
is that the one you're going to?
Yeah, big time. Yeah.
Should we go to it?
Yeah, why not?
All right. Back on Monday. We'll see you then.
The Square Ball Podcast.